Hello, hello. I'm Elena Chang, Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Initiatives at TCG. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm zooming in from the unceded lands of the Lenape. I'm a Korean American woman with mid-length dark brown hair in a half ponytail, wearing a black blazer over a very basic t-shirt. Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah Machiko Haber, the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Initiatives Associate, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a mixed Asian woman. I'm wearing blue light computer glasses and a black t-shirt. My hair is dark brown and shoulder length, and I'm sitting in front of the TCG Fall Forum virtual background. I'm coming to you today from the lands of the Canarsie, Montagnais, and the Munsee Lenape, or as it is better known today, Queens. We're excited to welcome you to the third and final day of our Fall Forum, and to our plenary session on centering accountability.
Following the leadership of Erin Washington and Jacob Padron, we wanted to start by sharing something joyful about ourselves on this Friday. So if you want to play along, share something bringing you joy this morning, however little or major, please do so in the chat. I got two things bringing me joy this afternoon. One, recently I've been revisiting the Korean word chung with a network of queer Koreans. And chung is a uniquely Korean form of love and solidarity. And I've shared this with members of Theater Networks of Color. These are folks who I get to community real quick with, and thought to share it with you all in this space. The second piece of joy I'm feeling this afternoon is my 7-step Korean skincare routine. Sarah?
Yeah, so I also have two things. The first is that one of my cousins got engaged yesterday, so that's an incredibly joyful thing. And the second is the really fat squirrel that's been hanging out outside of my window for like the last 10 minutes, and it's just sitting on a branch snacking. And it really seems like that branch should like break under the weight of the squirrel, but it doesn't. And just that little bit of nature and the physics of it and the wisdom of the squirrel to like know what it needs and know its limits. And it's just like a little chunk monster going like, winter is coming and I need to get my snacks. So that's bringing me joy right now.
Thank you, Sarah. We also want to thank Alexandra Maida and Jonathan McCrory for their session on centering community. We also wanted to offer our deep thanks to the participants of last night's AT Live presentation of Artist Activist Table Talk. This virtual roundtable featured Black and Latinx trans women who are both community leaders and masterful artists. If you were there, please share your appreciation in the chat for Nyla Foster, Lady Dane Figueroa Ididi, Lila Star Escada, and moderator Marique Jensen. We'll be sharing the video on November 20th, Transgender Day of Remembrance, and please support the work of these awesome artist activists.
A few reminders before we get started. If you haven't already shared some of your thoughts and reflections on the Fall Forum whiteboard, you can find a link in the chat to do so. We also encourage you to keep the conversation going on Mighty Networks and to join the TCG Circle if you haven't already. Links for doing that are also in the chat. And a final reminder that the lobby, our virtual open space, is open today from 12 to 6 p.m. It's part virtual help desk, part virtual watering hole, and the lobby is there for any questions you might have or if you need a place to keep the conversation going. And now I'm going to pass to the lovely Emilia Cachapiro.
Thank you, Sarah. Hello, friends. Good morning or afternoon, depending on your time zone. I'm Emilia Cachapiro, Director of Artistic and International Programs, she, her, hers, standing on the land of the Lenape. I'm a brown-skinned Filipino woman with short black hair, black glasses, and I'm wearing a gray V-neck sweater with a pearl necklace. Behind me is a blue wall, and actually you may see my Joy, my cat, Coco, walking through at some point. We wanted to share another community building opportunity with our BIPOC participants, New BIPOC on the Block. It's going to be this Saturday, tomorrow, November 14th from 4 to 7 p.m. Eastern. And we'll welcome newly named BIPOC theater leaders at predominantly white theaters to build community. We'll strategize how to dig our roots deeper for the future of other BIPOC in the theater, and to begin to further understand how our larger BIPOC theater community can best provide support. There's a link, I believe, in the chat to learn more about the meeting. And we want to thank Walt Disney Imagineering and the Howard Gilman Foundation for their support. So, you know, folks, we're in front of a screen most of our day. And all of that sitting is compressing our spine, which really runs from the base of your neck to your tailbone. And it's important to move our spine 6 ways every day to keep it healthy. Now, feel free to turn off your screen for a moment. Sit comfortably with both feet planted on the ground, and think about breathing into your belly rather than in your thoracic area, which is the upper chest. And you might want to place a hand on your belly just to remind yourself that that's where the breath wants to come from. Now, place your hands on your shoulder and move your elbows to touch in front of you. And then reverse moving your elbows apart, and there's a slight arch in your spine as your chest raises. Now, again, bring your elbows to touch, and your elbows move away behind you. That's great. Now, if you place your hands at the base of your neck, right at the top of really where your spine is, and rest your head in your hands and gently lift your head away from your neck. You're going to feel a slight traction. It should actually feel good. Don't pull too hard. Okay, you can let that go. And resting your right hand on your right thigh, raise your left hand to the ceiling, reaching to the right. Think about keeping your shoulder down, and your head is going to tip to the right a little bit. And just hold it there for a moment. Bring your left arm down and place that on your left thigh. Raise your right arm to the sky, tip over to the left, keeping that shoulder down. And making sure that you're not constraining your neck, your head. Okay, bring that arm down. And if you place your right hand on the inside of your left knee and raise your left hand shoulder height, so your thumb is right pointing up to the ceiling, and just with your eyes, follow your thumb as your hand moves behind you. So you're going to feel a little twist. Hold it there for a second. Don't overstretch, just what's comfortable. Bring it back forward. Try it again, watching that thumb moving behind you. Shoulders down. As much a reminder for me as for you. Bringing that hand back, placing left hand on left thigh, and actually put your left hand closer to the inside of your left knee. Now raise the right hand with the right thumb pointing to the ceiling, and same thing, it's moving behind you, slowly. Holding it there, keep breathing from your belly. Bring your hand in front of you. Once more, follow that thumb behind you. Keeping your shoulder down. And then bring your hand back, and you can just rest your hands on your thigh. And if you'd like, you can turn your screen back on. Up to you, your call. Hey there. So I grew up in San Francisco, and when I was a kid, every summer, my family would visit the giant redwood trees. And I remember complaining to my parents because I wanted to go to Disneyland like all the other kids. But now I understand why my father wanted to go. Never have we been so far from merging with the natural world and so divorced from nature. By 2050, 66% of the world's population is going to be living in cities. And according to a study sponsored by the EPA, before COVID, the average person spent 93% of their time indoors, 93%. And sitting at your desk looking out the window isn't the same. That doesn't count, right? So my father was Filipino, not Japanese, but he understood the Japanese idea of shinrin-yoku, which translates to forest bathing or absorbing the forest atmosphere. In 1982, the Japanese Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, and Fisheries created the term, and the goal of forest bathing is to live in the present moment while immersing your senses in the visuals and the sounds of a natural setting. Shinrin-yoku is like a bridge. So by opening our senses, it bridges the gap between us and the natural world. And the good news is that actually even a small amount of time in nature can have an impact on our health. It lowers your blood pressure, heart rates, and the levels of harmful hormones like cortisol, which your body produces when you're stressed out. Now there's a Japanese forest, Inan Furusato no Mori, and it has a forest therapy program that includes guided walks. Doctors are on hand, and when you arrive, you're given a physical health checkup and a psychological questionnaire. Then the therapist works out the best walking plan for you. So let's take a minute or so, and we're going to go visit the redwoods, California redwoods. Okay, so I know that was just a brief interlude in nature, but there's other things that you could search out, and I just really, really recommend taking a walk outside so you're not one of the 93% that is stuck in, you're not spending 93% of your time indoors always. So now it's my great, great pleasure to welcome the co-facilitators of our next session and welcome them to the virtual stage, Sonia Fernandez, Mina Morita, Lauren Spencer, and Eric Ting. Thank you, my friends.
Thank you, Emilia. Hi, everybody. Hello. That was lovely. That was amazing. I miss Muir Woods right now. Can we continue this moment, actually, if you wouldn't mind, all of you who are here with us right now, and join me in just a brief centering exercise, a brief grounding exercise, if you would. We've definitely taught ourselves to resist urgency and to find our way into a moment. So taking that metaphor of the redwoods, friends, close your eyes. And I'm just going to invite you to plant your feet on the ground in whatever way you're able to. And really soften your feet. Really Let them soften into the ground. Let them flatten. Feel the tension release. And I'm going to invite you actually to sort of imagine now from your feet tendrils or roots growing down into the ground. And it's coming out from under your feet and it's stretching out across the ground. It's stretching across the rug, across the floor, across the concrete, through your socks, through your soles, beyond the floor into the earth, through the rock, through the soil, through the loam, through water, deep, deep. And just take a moment to consider where you are and to think about the person that stood in this space before you. And the person before that person. And the person before that. And the person who stood in that space 10 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. And feel that collective presence. And we invite you just to think and meditate for a moment on the shared space that is not simply a physical space, but a temporal space. And just if you wouldn't all mind taking a deep breath with us. In on a 4, hold on a 4, release on 8. Here we go. And inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Hi, everyone. We're going to do some introductions really quick. My name is Eric Ting. I am the artistic director at California Shakespeare Theater. My pronouns are he, him, his. A quick visual description of the image in my screen. I am a Chinese American man with close cropped hair, glasses, wearing a pair of white earphones, sitting in a large room that is a basement of my sister's home. You can't see this, but Bruce Lee is on my t-shirt. I just wanted to share that, so I'm sharing that. Also, I am zooming into you all, grateful and honored to be on Shawnee, Osage, and Hopewell unceded territory. And I love this. I'm going to offer my joy, which is from time to time you might hear the pitter patter of feet running around upstairs, and that's my niece and nephew who I've had a couple weeks of time with. I'm going to pass this now to Lauren.
Thanks, Eric. Hi, all. My name is Lauren Spencer. I go by she, her, hers. I am coming to you from unceded Lenape territory, otherwise known as Philadelphia. I am an actor, director, writer, person invested in our theater community who's very excited to be with you all here today. A brief visual description is that I am a mixed Black woman with long brown hair, wearing a burnt orange sweater, sitting on a brown couch. I am also in my basement, Eric, of my brother, since I'm usually in San Francisco. And so you may also hear the pitter patter of my nieces and nephews who are causing quite a ruckus upstairs, but are also my great joy. And I would love to introduce my co-facilitator, Mina Morita.
Thank you, Lauren. Hey, everyone. Welcome, welcome. My name is Mina Morita. I use the pronouns she, her, hers, Crowded Fire artistic director and calling in from the unceded lands of the Chochenyo Ohlone peoples. And a brief description of me. I'm an Asian American mixed race woman. I have very long hair that is currently up in a bun because it continues to get long and unruly. I have on makeup, olive skin tones, and then I have a mustard collared shirt, soft shirt with a burnt orange shawl, flowers in the background to celebrate my birthday, and some snacks, popcorn, and some plants. And I'm going to pass it on to Sonia.
Hello, everyone. Happy birthday, Mina. I'm Sonia Fernandez. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the interim artistic director at Magic Theater. I am visual description. I am a light-skinned Latina woman with chin length, dark hair, and black framed glasses, sitting in a room that is next to the garage. It's a similar basement style. Behind me are white walls and some shelter-in-place art from my 5-year-old that features rainbows and hearts and bright colors. And giving me joy is outside this window that is behind the computer is our backyard where the dogs are playing and my daughter is climbing a tree. I am zooming in from the unceded lands of the Ramaytush Ohlone people, colonially known as San Francisco. I am grateful to the people who've been living and working and stewarding this land from time immemorial. So now I see that people have started to do this already, but if you'd like to share and acknowledge the peoples of the lands that you are on, feel free to do so in the chat. Send it back to Eric, I think.
Thanks, Sonia. So hey, everybody. So our panel, our little session today here at the Fall Forum is centering accountability. And when TCG reached out to us, it became really clear that the thing that we wanted to share with you all is a little effort that's happening here in the Bay Area that we lovingly refer to as the Bay Area Theater Accountability Workgroup. That's a big name. Anyhow, and we thought we'd just get started at the very top with just a little bit of background, if that's okay, a kind of like how we got here conversation. And we will definitely get into accountability and get into how accountability is showing up in our practices and in our organizing around this work. But I just thought, well, so we're gonna kind of like just have a nice casual conversation between the four of us. And we'll talk about who the four of us are and our role in this work group as well at a certain point in the course of this session. So just kind of going backwards a little bit, you know, if I'm thinking about roots and I'm thinking about the roots of this work, at least for me, it has its roots in the Me Too movement and the Bay Area Theater's kind of collective response to the Me Too movement. One of the things that came about as a result of that, our former artistic producer, S.K. Karastis, helped us organize a town hall. And at that town hall, we were interested in bringing ways of addressing harm that were that didn't rely on punitive actions or on the sort of excisement of people from our communities. And SK introduced us to Mia Mingus, who is the co-founder of the Bay Area Transformative Justice Collective and was recently named one of the Ford Foundation's Disability Futures Fellows, the inaugural cohort there. Mia's amazing. We're going to talk more about Mia here in a moment. But that work actually led to a really extraordinary opportunity at Cal Shakes, where with a grant from the Irvine Foundation, we were able to invite Mia Mingus to work with a few of us at Cal Shakes, but also about 25 in total theater practitioners and administrators and leaders from around the Bay Area on a kind of year-long journey through the transformative justice work. It's important to name at this moment, right, that transformative justice actually has its roots in restorative justice, which has its roots in indigenous practices. So I'm really just naming that legacy is, I think, really, really important. So a lot of that was kind of groundwork for what happened as we as a theater community suddenly found ourselves facing a pandemic. I'm going to hand it to you, Mina.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, so thinking back to the moments when the pandemic was first affecting all of us, and just sort of this sense of isolation and not knowing how to function, what was going to happen, the sense of suspension. And so Eric and I had a conversation and started to organize, or tried to organize, an artistic director group that would meet. Initially, it was weekly, to start to have conversations about how we were thinking, addressing how we were feeling, because so many of us were carrying a great deal of sense of responsibility, and how this cohort might collectively organize and work together towards supporting the artists, who many of us were very, very concerned about. And then, of course, we had an awakening, not only in the nation in following George Floyd's murder and the protesting, but also with the We See You White American Theater movement. So I'm going to pass it on to Sonia.
Yeah, so we'd been meeting as an artistic director sort of group for months, and then this came to a head. And I remember very strikingly a meeting where I think Eric and I were the only BIPOC people on the Zoom. And the conversation, which I identified with, was a feeling of helplessness in the face of this racial justice revolution, of what can we do as theater makers to combat systemic racism, to combat anti-Black violence. And I just got very frustrated because I felt that we need to work on our stuff, that what we can do is where we have power, and that there's a lot that we can do to make lives better. So I'll pass it back to Eric to talk a little bit more about that.
So one of the things that we knew when we were looking around was that if we wanted to really meaningfully address this kind of urgency of this moment, was that the group that we had gathered together within this artistic director cohort felt insufficient. And it also felt, maybe perhaps I should add, unfair to assume that the folks that had gathered together for what was essentially a kind of leader support group during a pandemic should somehow be the assumed group. Like, we should assume that that group would be similarly committed to addressing racial inequity in our field and in our communities. And so, you know, what became very, very clear to us in that moment was that we needed to hit reset on our efforts. That artistic director cohort continues to this day. It meets regularly every other week. But what a group of us decided that we really needed to do was we needed to sort of start again. And we wanted to recognize that there were voices missing from the conversation, that if we were really going to address this in our community, that it couldn't just be artistic directors, that it had to be, we had to think more expansively. And I'm gonna pass now to Lauren.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, it's interesting when we think about our theater communities, because so much power is tied to title and position. And with the uprisings around George Floyd's murder, and also the We See You documents, it became clear that there's this top-down structure, this hierarchical structure that is a product of capitalism, that we're all swimming in it, right? And so we sometimes, all of us, I think, fail to recognize that leadership comes in different ways that are not prepackaged or titled. And there are many artists independently who can hold leadership. And that actually the diversification of understanding what it means to be a leader and the many ways that that manifests is a really important tool for the success of an accountable space, of a space that is seeking equity and justice. And so Mina actually reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in joining this group, along with a number of other artists who don't necessarily represent an institution or organization, but also represent the interests that perhaps the institutions and organizations are interested in, as well as the interests of the communities that they come from, of other artists, and of the work as we move forward. So I stepped in along with several other artists, and now we have a really beautifully inclusive group that I think speaks to what we hope the community will be able to lift up as we move forward. And I'm gonna pass it on to Mina.
And And, you know, I mentioned this on Wednesday, but I think what was really important for us to recognize is just how interconnected all of us are, that our artists, who are the central people, the central creative spirit for all of the work we do, everything we do is built around artists, should be built around artists, that the artists were moving porously and through all of our organizations, especially considering the Bay Area, which is a very expensive place to live, where there's a lot of gentrification and displacement happening, that many of us work, you know, more than two, 3 jobs to make ends meet here. And so it became important to us to consider that we are a community of people, a community of organizations, and that artists must have a safe work environment to be able to create and manifest a future that we really wanted to think about and to be inspired to live in. And I'm going to pass it over to Eric.
We have to stop this passing. It's going to take up so much time. No. So anyhow, okay. Also, just to name, we're embracing imperfection here. So we're going to take a moment to catch our breath. And I'm just going to say that before we get into a conversation about the accountability work group, we did want to take a moment now to talk a little bit about transformative justice, because it's played a very inspirational role in the way that we've thought about the work of the work group and also the kind of trajectory of it. So a couple things to name at the very beginning. None of us are experts in transformative justice. We are not here as representatives of that work. Mia Mingus is an expert in transformative justice, but Mia Mingus is not the only expert in transformative justice. There are an extraordinary collective of individuals and organizations across this country that are doing TJ work and have made TJ work their life's work. So, you know, I would encourage you, if you're interested in any of the things that you're hearing right now, to kind of like go out and like take a look at it. The big thing for us as we were coming to this work was that we really saw this effort not as an effort of leadership, I should say, but more as an effort of collective learning and collective growth. And that, like, I think even like in that brief conversation, I remember, Sonia, you and I, we were talking about this, like even we felt kind of like completely inadequate to the moment, and recognizing actually that it wasn't about finding the person who could lead us through this, but it was finding a way that we could lead ourselves collectively into something that could have meaningful change. So we wanted to lift up some key principles about transformative justice that I think, just to give you all, just kind of set the groundwork. There is a link to Mia Mingus's blog, I think somewhere in the kind of description of this session, and in particular, a link to a post that Mia Mingus has written around apology, but specifically that first part of it talks about the 4 parts of accountability as Mia describes it. We're going to look at those briefly here in a little bit. But I think it's just really nice to talk a little bit about what drew us to accountability in the first place. So we're going to share out some of the kind of key principles that really kind of just resonated with each of us. One of the ones that I want to talk about is this notion of interrupting harm before it reaches critical levels, which is where intervention often happens for the very first time. So there's a really great kind of drawing that Mia will use from time to time, which is a kind of XY axis. And in that XY axis, what you'll look at is you'll look at a little sort of like, I think the Y axis is about the degree of harm and the X axis is time. And as you're watching it go, this is like probably not showing up the way I'm seeing it on the screen, but the curve kind of starts really low like this, and then it shoots up at the very end. And so what this basically is describing, right, is the arc of violence, right? And how oftentimes when harm is first addressed, it's way up here. It's after the fact. It's when the police are called, right? It's when the complaints are filed. And that part of what was really important to me in thinking about TJ work, one of the great wisdoms, right, is that part of TJ work is actually about, it's about interrupting harm before it ever reaches those critical levels, and really looking at all of the circumstances and systems and behaviors that contribute to the culture that allows for that harm to build and grow. And to say that another base assumption of this work, because of this, is that what we seek to do in order to interrupt that harm is to be in right relationship with one another. And that idea, right, that the interruption of harm requires us to be in relationship with one another. It requires us to be in community with one another so that we can actually speak to things well before they have turned into a way that we can't control anymore. Is just something that I wanted to share.
Yeah, I think another principle that comes up is transparency, and what it means to have these relationships out loud, right? You see that quote floating around by Cornel West is, justice is what love looks like in public, right? So when we think about all of these institutions or these harms that have happened, when we think about racial equity and justice, it's one thing for me and Eric to have a conversation and to be accountable to each other. But if we're doing it quietly and the sort of ripple effects still affect the people around us, and we're not making that public, we're not being clear about that, we're not having the courage to step forward and say, this is how we're acknowledging the harms that have been done and how we're contending with them, then a greater change in our community is not going to happen. So harnessing transparency about being clear about our work, sharing our work. Eric just said about how it's not just about taking up the mantle and being in leadership, but actually about the humility to grow and learn, and growing and learning in public to serve the greater community. Sonia and Mina, I'm also just going to talk about consent right now, if that's okay to put it together. So along with transparency, I know I was really struck hearing Mia speak at actually a panel that Cal Shakes had put together on accountability. She had spoken about that true accountability necessitates consent. There is no true accountability without consent. And when I heard that, I was like, I need to stop and take a breath, because it really encapsulated what I hadn't been able to name for myself about why so many efforts I had been a part of in pursuing equity and justice and community in the past had not been entirely successful. That truly we are always talking about holding people accountable. We must hold this person accountable. We must hold this organization accountable, this institution accountable, our government accountable. But if the person themselves is only, or the institution is only working and operating under a coercive force, that aligns with, as Mia would say, a more punitive action, right? So you can have some consequences that go along with that, and you might get microscopic change here and there. But for true change, there really needs to be consent and a leaning into an investment in taking on, how do I hold myself accountable? And what is really great is, how is our aim being able to build capacity for people to hold themselves accountable? So shifting from, let me hold you accountable, Eric, to how can I support you in building your own capacity and desire to hold yourself accountable so that I, Lauren, don't have to do that work. And that was really impactful for me, and is what drew me to this group that we all became a part of.
And all of that takes a lot of work. And we've been talking a lot about, like, how do we build up that practice, the work, the day-to-day work of getting in there, just like rehearsal. We might be going down one pathway with a scene or a moment and realize that it's not exactly what we had hoped in terms of how we're telling the story. And then there's joy in figuring that out and getting the note and like reconsidering it and approaching it again a different kind of a way. So it's a practice that's required.
Yeah, I like the metaphor of exercise, of building up the muscle for accountability, that we are very bad, actually, I think, at taking feedback, at taking criticism. And so just building up the muscle to be accountable to yourself. And, we're not going to run a marathon today. We need to train for that. And that's what this kind of work, and I think, touching back on what Eric said about starting small, right? So starting with 1 mile, and it's going to hurt. and it's survivable, just like I'm gonna ride this exercise metaphor all the way. It's you will survive being accountable, and there is joy because you will be healthier and you'll be contributing to a healthier community and a healthier field. So yeah, finding joy on the other side of it.
Before we move on, I just want to lift up some things that are happening in the chat. So Amy, I just want to repeat, I put it in the chat, but per your request, I just want to repeat what I said. I was saying, how do I, Lauren, support Eric in building his capacity and desire to hold himself accountable so that I am not having to do the work and labor that really should be his if he impacted me in a harmful way. And Eric, I'm sorry for using you as an example.
No, that's all right.
Permission.
I'm guilty.
And then also, I just wanted to share, because someone had asked in a private message that this work is applicable to TYA efforts, theater for young audiences. We did have several of the first invitations to the group, and initially the group did have some BIPOC leaders of TYA organizations. Because there's so many concurrent efforts going on, they had to step away, but it's definitely an interest that the group has had and is an open invitation. So I do think it's applicable to all forms of theater engagement. But if any of you all want to speak to that, that was just a question that came up.
And also, I think that our artists are moving through all these spaces. I mean, an artist is not like, I'm only just working with this one organization, or only with TIA, or only with new play development, or only in musical theater. I mean, they move through all kinds of organizations, spaces, and areas, especially in the Bay Area geographically too.
I mean, we have like something like within what is determined the Bay Area, upwards of 300 or more theaters. So it's a broad geographic space, but also there's just a large number of theaters that practice here. Can I share some slides? All right, so hey everybody. So we just made a little slideshow, which has the 4 parts of accountability as Mia describes them. I'm gonna just pop them up. I think we're gonna try and do this. Let me see how it looks like in terms of the screen, but we're gonna try and pop these up. We're just gonna take turns reading one of these parts. And then I think we're gonna spend a little bit of time, the 4 of us, reflecting on what this part of accountability means. Just at the very beginning, I just wanna say a couple things before we show you these 4 parts of accountability. It's important to name that this work is not a linear progression, right? One of the things that we are taught is that this is not a situation where you graduate from part 1 to part 2, and then graduate from part 2 to part 3, and then 3 to 4. Really, you want to see this. I mean, I've seen the word ecosystem, ecology kind of used a lot, and like in the course of this space, and so this notion that these 4 parts of accountability are actually in constant interaction with each other. So that if they are offered to you in an order, that's only a sequence that exists within sort of like a larger kind of parallel existence of all of these parts. Is that cool? I am going to share. Let's see if this works. Hey, look at that. Okay, so really quickly, just because I love her, there's Mia Mingus's picture. And these are the 4 parts of accountability as described in that link that Josh, thank you, Josh, shared earlier. The 4 parts of accountability, as Mia describes them, are self-reflection, apology, she actually, I think, uses apologizing, repair, and behavior change. So we're going to start with the very first one, self-reflection. Here we go.
So I'll just read this. Self-reflection runs through all accountability work, but you must have initial self-reflection to know that you have done something hurtful or harmful, and most importantly, want to make amends or address it genuinely. You will need to and should continue to self-reflect throughout the different stages of your accountability. But you must begin in a place where you can understand your actions and the impact they had, so that you can get to a place where you're willing to make things right, or vice versa. Still, true accountability must be consensual. Accountability requires change, and you cannot change other people, only yourself. In short, You cannot force someone to be accountable. So I just, wanted to share a tiny bit of my own journey to this work. That self-reflection has been really important for me in terms of even before the emergence of this group. Within the shelter in place, I was just made very aware of the inequities in our field. And I've been reflecting a lot on my place in theater and the way that I'd had a tunnel vision and had been upholding and had been complicit in upholding these structures, and just reckoning with that and feeling accountable to myself to be better. And that's what continues to fire me, and this continual sort of self-reflection, and checking in with myself about that.
Another example is, I remember, I'll just offer one of the, listen, self-reflection is like a constant state. It's like, oh my God, I'm failing at it regularly. I think an example that I would share here is the living document that was mentioned earlier in this conversation. The living document is a living document of BIPOC experiences in the Bay Area theater. And this was a document that was shared by a Bay Area theater maker. And it was essentially an largely anonymous collection of testimonials around kind of harmful experiences that BIPOC individuals encountered in the Bay Area theater, like reaching far back, kind of many, many years into the very present. And I remember being named in that, right? And like Cal Shakes was like one of the theaters that was a part of this. And we all have organizational histories, we all have legacies that we wrestle with. And I remember being named in it, and I was like, oh, wait. And like one of the things that comes up in self-reflection a lot, right, is intention versus impact. And what was clear to me was like, wait, I know I didn't intend to do that, but I had to work my way through a whole sequence of, saying to myself, oh, I didn't mean to do that. And then going to why I thought they might have experienced it that way, to going to, and you had to take these steps to eventually get to the point where actually that didn't matter. And really the thing that we needed to look at, that I needed to look at, was the impact of this, and to just simply to begin to take accountability for those actions. You want to go to the next slide, or Mina, Lauren, do you want to share anything?
I just would offer that for me, I've realized that, this work is peeling layers after layers, so it's never finished. So the self-reflection, talking about how this framework is not linear, it always cycles back to me to self-reflection first, because whenever I think I have something figured out, it's only opening up a deeper level of, now I can participate at this deeper level, but it requires more reflection, because all of these forces of white supremacy, capitalism, internalized oppression are very slippery. And the more we have language to speak about them, and the more we have frameworks to speak about them, the slipperier, I don't know if that's a word, but why not today, it becomes. And so self-reflection for myself was a catalyst probably, 5 or 6 years ago, actually in a play I did with Mina Morita called Blackademics. And I'm going to shout out Idris Goodwin, because he was writing about Blackness in all its forms at that moment. But it has continued to be so as I do the work of, when I need to take a breath, I need to come back to self-reflection, because it can offer me the way forward if I can step into it with some humility.
And also, we've been talking a lot, and I've been thinking personally a lot about myself as an individual, as a person, and sort of my self-reflection, how do I sleep at night based on the choices I'm making? And how do I, capitalism tries to make us feel as an institutional leader like we are always representing an organization, and somehow then have to rely on what that public messaging is, the optics of that is. And so there's a separation of the self that is healthy from the organization, but also an understanding of how self-reflection with the self reflects into choices that are made as an organizational leader, and how it all comes down to the choices we make as people in terms of how we harm other people, and bringing it back to the personal and the relational. So it has been this interesting cycle of unpacking the self with organization choices, and then organizational choices, and understanding the through line there.
Here comes slide 2.
So slide 2 is apology, or apologizing, as Mia might put it. So apology is a chance to acknowledge and take responsibility for the hurt or harm you were caused or were complicit in. It is a moment to demonstrate to those you have harmed that you understand what you did and what the impact was. You may need to apologize more than once or many times, depending on the severity of the harm, how deep the hurt went, how badly the trust was broken, or if the hurt became a pattern. Apologizing is a fundamental part of the rebuilding of trust, and because of this, it is a key place for you to practice vulnerability. Remember, the only way to build trust is through vulnerability. Trust is key in our work to end cycles of violence, because when violence or harm happens, trust is one of the first things that gets broken. Because of this, apologizing and repair are often interdependent on each other. So I'm going to talk a little bit about an example I shared in what we in the accountability work group called the learning space, which we'll describe what that means a little bit later. But we were speaking about apology, and I shared a recent experience where I had been speaking to a friend and had made like an offhand comment, and realized after the fact that it was a fat phobic comment, which obviously had nothing to do with this person and had everything to do with me and the culture that we were raised in terms of body image and these things. And I had this moment where, because I'd been doing this work, I was like, oh, I really should apologize right now. And it was this full body somatic experience of like freezing up and sweating and shame spiral and all of these things. And also trying to figure out how I could get out of it. Like, can I let this phone conversation end and then just text her afterwards, because that'll be easier for me. I can still apologize, but I don't actually have to do like the hard work. And it was a moment where I thought about this work, and what Mia says, which I think is so beautiful, is that it is a chance, it is an opportunity. And it is as much about, I don't want to say undoing the harm, but about acknowledging the harm and starting the process of accountability for the other person you have harmed. But also it is a chance to really step into who you could be, and to not let yourself be a person who just perpetrates harm and never takes the chance to meet it. The vulnerability and trust that came out of that conversation is a gift to myself as much as it is a gift to my friend. And I really resonated with what it means with the trust building and the multiple apologies, because I think when I was growing up, you know, we all come from different cultures of what it means to apologize. And as a mixed Black woman, as a femme identified person, you know, I was either taught to apologize for taking up space, or for, you know, being in my femininity, or I was taught to combat that by never apologizing, by just like really holding space and being strong, and that apology was a sign of weakness. And that was something that and is still something I have to come up against a lot, that apology is actually a bridge that I am building to strengthen relationship, versus a sign that I'm a terrible person. And it's been really enlightening to do this work and free myself from those structures, and see how being able to say, I am sorry that I hurt you. Speaking of intention and impact, I'm sorry that what I did had this impact Not, I'm sorry that you feel that way, but I'm sorry that what I did may, cause this feeling, has really enabled me to have deeper relationships and make more impact that how I want to be as a person in the world.
If I could add to, one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is human relationship over organization and organizational protection. So, often, especially in our boards, there's a legal conversation about, the optics of what we say and what we're allowed to say, what we're not allowed to say, because it opens us up to liability. But if we were to put aside the capitalist corporate structures that exist there, we're placing the human first, and we're actually listening to understand that harm has been caused, and that apology has to be true and authentic. And even if it came from our organization and it's not something we did directly to that person, it is about creating, like, disrupting that harm, which we'll get into in a second as the next part of it. But, I think there's a lot of us right now who are afraid to step into apology and really take in what has happened. And this is the choice we get to make now, is do we turn towards sort of a redemption and create a field where harm no longer happens, where it's safe to be a creator? Or do we turn away because we don't have the courage or the strength, frankly, to embrace our full potential and our ability to love and feel compassion for other people?
One more thing, I think, to both your points, that just kind of blows my mind about apology and how Mia talks about apology specifically, is that she's focused on apologies that are about, like, remaining in relationship with the person that you have harmed. And that's really key, right? Which is that, like, part of the act of apologizing is an assumption that you want to remain in right relationship with the person that you are apologizing to and that you've caused harm to. And that, to me, was just kind of like mind blowing, because really it's like, it is about community. It is about the sort of community that you want to hold on to, the community that you want to forge, the people that you want to surround yourselves with. Like, if they mean something to you, you'll apologize. And, like, what does it mean? What does it mean about your relationship with the people that you don't feel like you need to apologize to? Next slide. Yeah, okay, good, hold on.
And I just want to invite us to read the slides a little bit more slowly. Thanks, team.
Oh, I think I'm reading repair. We've been talking a lot in the accountability work group about the kind of movement of this work, and we've been moving from a kind of insular space to a more public space. And this is an interesting pivot, because we're in this moment in our work at this midway point. And whereas apology and accountability are things that can be done kind of largely on your own, because, again, remember, the person that you are apologizing to does not have to accept that apology. They don't have to be in a space to receive it yet. Repair must be done in relationship and cannot be done alone. So, of course, you must do your own work on your own time in order to engage genuinely and effectively in the work of repair. Repair includes making amends and rebuilding trust, so that you can assure others that you will not commit the harm, the hurt, or harm again. Repair can take a long time and usually demands consistency and a level of faith in the face of fear that we are often not taught. You will most likely have to apologize more than once while you are practicing repair, and the process of repair can also help to reveal more harm that was caused, or a clearer picture of the depth of the impact of your actions or inaction. Repair is not linear and does not follow a set path. So yeah, this is a big one. I'm not even sure that I think I'm supposed to offer the initial reflection on this, and I'm not sure that I have one because we're still trying to figure it out and like what it means to like to genuinely repair a thing and how that manifests itself. You know, like in part for me at least, it's been. I'll just go back to the sort of initial sharing that I offered earlier, which is that for me, repair has really been fundamentally about like. So once you've done the self-reflection, once you've done the apology, what's next? Like, what are the ways within which you can create a foundation for you to ensure that the harm doesn't happen again, right? How do you get to the change behavior that we're coming to in a moment? And so for me, a lot of what I've been doing has been about connecting with folks who have, you know, reached out to me about that document and shared sort of their experiences, and being in conversation with them and apologizing to them. But then more importantly, right, doing the work to understand the context within which that harm occurred, right? And like looking at and examining, right, both the sort of the sort of situations in the workplace that allowed that to happen, my own sort of assumptions about leadership, and kind of really just starting to like put into place steps, and naming those steps to the people that I've harmed or caused harm to, so that they can see that there's an effort to begin to repair.
Yeah, I think that if I remember correctly, Mia talks about both of these two being very closely tied in relationship with each other, because there is no repair without behavior change in order to build trust, rebuild trust.
Yeah, and just to lift up that at a part of apology, and Mia says that apology and repair are often interdependent because of the trust that's necessary. So I think that just a lot of us have seen that institutionally in our field, apologies sometimes come out a lot and repetitively, but when there isn't a sense of active repair, the apology rings hollow and then actually is perhaps causing more harm as it continues to be issued, right? Or if I repair something, Sonia, can I use you as an example?
Sure.
If I'm trying to repair something that Sonia took issue with that I did, some harm that I did to her, but I never apologized to her, it's the repair is lacking that acknowledgement piece. I think what's been really important to me in relationships where I'm trying to repair with other folks, or I'm hoping that other folks will be, you know, attempting to repair for harm that they've done to me, is to center the person who has been harmed in figuring out what the repair should look like. Because often it ends up being what fits within our imagined ideas of what is possible within the confines of our institution or our organization, or just our ideas of ourselves as people. And so what I assume is repair, and what I think is a great idea of repair, is often not what the people or person who has been harmed needs. And then is it really repair at all? Or is it about me and my ego and protecting my place in the community, et cetera, et cetera. So that's been really central to repair for me.
Yeah, I was just going to lift up something of what you said that resonates with me, is that the performativity that apologies can sometimes hold when they are done to preserve institutions, and they are not done to right relationships or to strengthen relationships.
Next slide.
Great. And I just put in the chat like solidarity statements. I mean, anything that is said in a pattern of saying that doesn't have actual action and behavior change connected to it, it rings hollow, and we all can see through that. So All right, here we go. Behavior change. So behavior change is one of the hardest parts of accountability. Changing your behavior is not easy. We have all tried and failed to change our behaviors at one point or another in our lives. For example, New Year's resolutions. I do that all the time. Often, even seemingly benign behaviors have deeper roots in trauma that will require some level of healing. And I think that's something we talk a lot less about, is that a pattern of behavior comes from our experience. And many of us have learned, unsatisfying or bad behavior because of the trauma that we have encountered and felt. So for example, if you're struggling to practice self-care, you will inevitably have to confront why you consistently put yourself last. I think many of us can probably relate to that in the theater field. Our harmful and hurtful behaviors are also often part of patterns that we must break and require large shifts in our lives than just this one thing, which is why they tend to be so hard to change. Transforming your behavior is hard work and is easier done with support. And I want to speak to this last bit here for a second, which is Mia, and in Transformative Justice, refers to groups of support as your pods, so your pod people. These are the people, not every pod is the same for every experience in your life. It's one thing to be celebrating perhaps a moment where you're with your family. It's another thing if you're going through having harmed someone and needing to apologize, or you're really grappling with a break in your family, for example. Like, these are really hard moments. And so thinking about who your support network is in those moments, because it takes a particular kind of person who knows you really well and can really hear you and listen and offer some advice, and also hold us accountable in that behavior change. So isn't just there to say yes, 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 but is supportive with a firmness towards behavior change, because that's what we're asking them, that person, to do. And it's hard. I also said this on Wednesday. It's like the day-to-day work is the behavior change. When I feel that icky moment, when I've said something wrong, mispronounced a name, something happened in a meeting, I just decided like there was urgency because we had to get the marketing thing in right away. And I kind of like rammed it through the meeting, or I made a decision. Or there was a moment where I forgot to loop somebody in because I was trying to deal with, so many different things. Someone walked into our space and encountered harm, and I thought I wouldn't see that person again, so it didn't really matter. Like, all of those moments are part of a larger cycle of behavior. And so it's about slowing down and resisting urgency, acknowledging that we have this abundance of human compassion and kindness and expertise with each other. I mean, this is the theater around empathy. And so how do we lean into that instead of worry so much about finance, time, all of these things that are connected to capitalism? Let us ferret all of that behavior out.
I'm going to do a time check. So we had all these like really big plans about breaking out into breakout rooms at some point, but only if we weren't like in the middle of the conversation still at this moment in time. We're still in the middle of the conversation right now. So I hope y'all will stick with us as we continue to talk about how this work is now manifesting in the organizing that we've been doing in the Bay Area. Is this a good opportunity to pivot to the next section, friends?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So we want to take a little bit of time now to talk about the Bay Area Theater Accountability Workgroup. This is essentially what came of that moment of reset that we talked about earlier in this conversation when we all looked around and we said that, you know, like what organizations we had available to us felt insufficient to the change that we felt we needed to meet. And so, if there's a phrase that there's a little phrase that I've been using to describe the work of the Accountability Workgroup that I'll just read to you right now. If you're wondering what our purpose is or what the purpose of this is, it's to build capacity and consensus amongst the critical mass of Bay Area theater leadership in support of anti-racism practices and accountability in our work and in our communities. This is a form of coalition building anchored in a shared vocabulary around behavior change. So how that showed up really quickly was we all sent out an email to like every theater leader in the Bay Area. And we were like, hey, if you all are feeling even half what we're feeling, I think you'll want to join us for this first meeting. You know, like what we knew is like building community, committing time, practice, 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 that these were essential. So we had our first meeting shortly after the TCG National Conference this summer. About 90 Bay Area theater leaders joined us for that first meeting. It was 2 hours on a Thursday. And like that number has since about averaged around between 70 individual participants, around 50 people show up each time we have a full work group session. And those 50 to 70 individuals represent 42 Bay Area theater companies. This is our accountability work group.
And that said, as we were gathering everyone, it became very clear and apparent that the executive leadership of the Bay Area theaters was largely white. And so it became equally important to understand who was shaping or hosting and how we were hosting this larger group, so that the conversation was centering the most vulnerable in the community and in our region, and looking at many different aspects of leadership, as Lauren was saying earlier. So maybe Eric, I'll just talk about this other piece real quick. What was amazing is we had pulled together an initial group of about maybe 9 of us, was it Eric? 9 of us, to start to shape what this larger accountability work group was going to be. We didn't, you know, because we were leading collectively, and we were resisting as much as we could white supremacist traits of urgency and being overly hierarchical and structured, that we spent many, many hours talking through how, from week to week, as we went, we were going to shape this experience for ourselves as both participants and also as what we were calling ourselves hosts. So as we said to everybody else in the accountability work group, we were flying while we were building the plane. And of these leaders and emerging groups, oops, hold on one second, I hit the wrong button. There we go. That the cohort is largely now, we've doubled in size to about 15 and is largely BIPOC. The cohort is largely BIPOC. I want to take a moment to name our fellow CT members. So we have Jordan Battle, Shannon Davis, Leanne Dowd, William Hodgson, Anthony Jackson, Jeffrey Lowe, Michael Moran, Rose Oser, Julius Rea, Lee Rondon Davis, Dawn Monique Williams, as well as the 4 of us you see here.
Great, thanks.
And they're all awesome.
They are amazing.
They're all awesome.
They are amazing. And as Mina had said earlier, and we talked about in terms of distributed leadership, it was really important to all of us to break down the notions of hierarchy that are often an obstacle to actually creating change and creating new systems, envisioning a new way to hold space with each other and work in relationship. As Mina said, this has meant often that we've talked through things multiple times, much like the accountability framework. The communication framework that's required for accountability means revisiting and opening yourself up to others' points of view, and really also acknowledging that what is right in this moment, we might revisit in a week and make a different decision. It has been really lovely to also distribute workload with a vision of what it means to be equally accountable to each other. So it's not about, oh, I did this much and you are only doing this much, or you're doing this much. The vision really, how do we distribute the workload so that there is an equal opportunity or access point for leadership? So there's an access point for everyone to show up in the ways that they feel comfortable, so that also the larger accountability work group of our peers and leaders are seeing each of us in the seed team equally, and that our voices are all having an equal part in determining how we are sharing this work and moving through this work together and guiding this work. It has been really exciting for me because I think what we are doing is trying out some experiments of what new models and new forms of leadership could be in terms of what we can bring back to our institutions and organizations. If your rehearsal is a microcosm of the world at large, which we are always telling audiences, it is the way we are selling our work and selling its import, then it also can be a microcosm in how you participate in the world. So it's been really exciting to see what are all the different ways leadership can come to fruition when we share it.
Yeah, and it's so, I feel like I've learned so much. I feel like I've learned more in this year from this group and gotten so much strength from our collective learning and mistakes we've made, and like just trying to figure out, how do we lead together? Like, how do we make decisions? And talk through everything. I mean, we talk through capitalism deeply. We continue to talk about it. We talk about our interdependence. We talk about our personal relationships with organizations, the challenges that we have in terms of our independent artists. It feels like it's very much also based on social justice work and movements. And so we're learning a lot from understanding that part of the funneling that happens in the nonprofit industrial complex is something that we want to work against. To your point, Lauren, it's just the behavior, it's the day-to-day work around our behavior. And I think because of it, we've made stronger decisions as we've gone. And we talk about everything from the greeting and the opening to decolonizing work, to how we're going to look at data collection and how we're going to bring everyone on board. And now we're asking the rest of the larger accountability work group to engage in how we're shaping the next upcoming year.
And just to I didn't mean to interrupt you, Mina.
No, I wasn't going to say anything else.
Well, something you said made me think of, I was reading some really lovely remarks by Dr. Angela Davis, and she was talking about the myth of the magnetic leader. And that has really stuck with me, and how if you look at any movement, you look at the civil rights movement, feminism, like any movement that has really changed our world, there's always the idea that, it's Martin Luther King, or it's Malcolm X, or it's Gloria Steinem, or it's, Cesar Chavez. But it is actually really, if you unpack it, all of these folks working in concert together, and the people that we get to know rise up to the surface for valid reasons, and also for reasons that serve the systems that are actually trying to undermine the change. And so what I think we are just following in a lineage, but we are attempting to have consciousness around it and to be explicit around that lineage and its actual components, so that there is a clearer map from which to build new structures. And that feels really important to continue for all of us in this field, to name that it's not just the director of the play, it's the designers and the artists and the audience members and the community partners. It's not just the seed team, it's how we also interact with the larger group.
Yeah, I just wanted to, if I may, hop in just to radical transparency. This process has been messy. It is, so I don't want the image of our beautiful panel who speaks so beautifully and articulately about what we've been doing to hide the fact that it takes a long time. There are long meetings and discussions, and to be able to really include and to be truly sharing leadership is messy. And you know, we've mentioned some missteps and things, but I just wanted to name that that it's hard work, but it's necessary.
It's huge. And also just to say, like, we've called each other out so many times on different things, and we're starting to find the joy in it, and because it's with love, and it's just, you know, a culture of constructive disagreement, which I've also mentioned earlier this week, but it's like important. Disruption's important, because we are ultimately trying to disrupt. I love that word. Lauren uses it all the time.
Should I move on to our guiding values?
Sounds good.
I just wanted to lift up some of the, in one of our early meetings, we put a list of what the values we want to bring to the group are, and we looked back on them in thinking about this session. And there were 4 that really felt resonant, that you will have heard already in the last, oh man, hour and 40, hour 30. Interdependence, the interconnectedness of our Bay Area community was really important to us, and as organizations, but also as individuals, along with humility and vulnerability, bringing ourselves as individuals to the work and being vulnerable in that. In my session this last Thursday, I remember one of the members of my homeroom said, we were just reflecting on the last, I don't know how many weeks, and how we've been doing with the accountability work group. And she just shared that it had been a gift to be able to sort of shed some of the weight of the organization and just be in Zoom space as a person and be able to process and work through some of these issues with other people as humans. Lauren,
And peers.
Yeah.
Yeah, peership. I think we already said this, but just to reiterate, because it bears reiterating, Sonia was talking about the messiness of it and the time of it, and these values, you know, because the onboarding process was gradual, were actually established before I and several other members of the seed team were onboarded. And so there was a talk about how do we continue to come back to reevaluation, and how are we even, Eric, I think you were in, we have these ad hoc committee, talk about time. We have so many ad hoc committees, but Eric and I were in a smaller meeting developing an agenda the other day, and we went down a rabbit hole about transparency. And it became very clear that transparency for the 4 of us in the meeting meant 4 really different things. And also that how we attack it, or engage with it is a better word, as a seed team in our work is going to look really different if each of us were deciding what that was, so that we need to have a larger conversation again about what that means, how we're implementing it, and how we're going through. So just to say that, because just to share a little bit of our ongoing process of that your values are going to change and be iterated and refined over time, and that is true for us as well as anyone else engaging with this work at an authentic level.
It's worth I think it's worth, this is awesome. So it's worth naming, right, that also Mina just shared the list of values that Sonia mentioned that we created at the beginning of this journey in the chat. It's really worth mentioning, right? That was 5 months ago. And actually the seed team by its very design is a kind of fluid, it's a fluid team. So there's a number of people on the seed team now that were not even part of that original kind of design meeting. And it's designed to be fluid so that we can support each other's kind of own, like our personal life events that will come up from time to time, to allow the practice to sustain, which is one of those values, right? To allow the sustainability of the work that we're doing, but not in a way that requires a kind of sacrifice on the individuals participating in it. Yeah, just wanted to say that. And then also it's worth naming, we wanted to talk about this a little bit, right? Is that those values, they're really extraordinary values, but we fail at them all the time. You know, and even like the conversation around transparency is kind of like a really, like you could have a whole session on transparency, as Lauren was saying, right? About sort of like, what does it mean to genuinely be transparent? And like, and like, how does transparency both work for you? Like, how does transparency support liberation? But also, how does it kind of suppress vulnerability, right? And so like, that's a good example of just a simple kind of way that within which these questions kind of show up for us. Sorry, I just wanted to drop that in.
And I think I'm going to kind of move us on from values, which is why people keep coming back. This is one of Eric's favorite questions to the group. It was amazing. We did sort of a check-in yesterday. Was that yes? That was yesterday. We had our accountability work group yesterday. Here are some comments that this is the first time that this community has gathered around a common goal. And that's huge. And I remember like, even I think right after Trump was elected, like we had our first ever, and it was only 16 people, artistic directors gather around a table in the Bay Area ever. And that just sort of blows my mind, because I think if we are in the work of building community, why are we not doing that ourselves as well? Other comments are, I've been a leader in the Bay Area for 20 years, and this is the first time we've ever gathered like this. Another is, I came trying to figure out how to change my organization, and I've stayed because of how I've changed through this work. So, and then, you know, ultimately one of our challenges, and here's naming our imperfection and what we're still trying to figure it out, is in the beginning of the meetings in early July, we had a fairly strong BIPOC participation as far as our region. And as we've gone on, a number of them have sort of peeled away while supporting the work, but also the awareness that it's become a primarily white space. And so we are working really hard to continue to center their concerns, especially Black and Indigenous concerns. And then this is done through the SEED team. But ultimately, the next big question for us is, how do we strengthen and support BIPOC community members and leaders, and how at some point, to be true community, do we weave all of us back together again so that the mutual accountability is happening? Because all of us have work to do, but also, like, you know, I think there was a recognition that because it was a primarily white space, is a primarily white space right now, that there is potential harm, there is potential sidelining of concern. I think that even TCG's Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Institute has struggled with this as well, but it's a struggle for us too. So just naming that and lifting that up.
Yeah, we can. I'm going to just do a really quick time check and acknowledge that we have 13 minutes left in the original timing of this session, but TCG has asked us or invited us to continue this conversation for an additional 30 minutes. We'd love to do that. We're happy to continue to talk about this work and actually to take some questions more directly here in about 10 minutes. If folks are willing to stay with us, does that seem cool? I mean, TCG is saying yes, right? So we're gonna go ahead and do this. We'll see what happens from there.
Eric,
is that Devin? Yes. Hi, Devin.
Hi. I think maybe a little miscommunication. We do need to close in 12 minutes.
Okay, great.
Sorry about that.
Thank you. No,
Uh-huh.
that's so good to know. Okay, good. So we're going to close in 12 minutes. So I'm doing a proper time check right now. I'm going to just really quickly, I think we're going to try and really quickly go over to capture these last 12 minutes, the work group structure. So like, I think one of the questions that we get a lot is, well, how are you doing this? Like, what are the actual, what's the shape or form that you're building this? So, so if I might, I'm just going to just really quickly go through this. So what we've identified in the course of this work is what we describe as cycles and cadences. So we talked about the 4 parts of accountability. The 4 parts of accountability, as described by Mia Mingus, are what we're using as a broad scaffold for our first 4 cycles of work in the accountability work group. So each cycle is named after one of the parts of accountability. Each cycle is then divided into what is essentially, each cycle is 9 weeks, no, 12 weeks, no, 9 weeks, sorry. Each cycle is 9 weeks and divided into 3 cadences. Sorry, it's words. I love the words though. So a cadence is essentially what we think of as a single kind of like thing that we're doing. So so a cadence is made up of essentially 3 weeks. The first week is a full accountability work group session, where usually we get the 50 to 70 people come and join us for 2 hours on a Thursday. The second week, then, it's followed by what we call a learning space. And the learning space is an opportunity for individuals who feel not quite experienced enough in the themes of the conversations that we hold in the full work group to join members of our seed team in continued collective learning around the themes of the last work group session that we held. And then the third week, we set aside specifically for the seed planning team to gather together and program and design the next cadence. And so that's like our cycles and cadences. And then that then is divided into, so I'm going to hand it off to Sonia to talk about the next chunk.
That I just wanted to share that sometimes the learning space is also, I think, just people who want more time to process, who are just really invested in the work. So just to name that. So early on, we discussed the fact that a lot of what we wanted to do was build relationships amongst the community, because as has been noted, and as people have been lifting up in the chat, like leadership does become siloed, and how do we like just get to know each other and trust each other a little bit more through this process, so that we can be accountable to each other. And so we developed this plan to make small breakout sessions a part of the large accountability work group that happens every 3 weeks. And initially we curated these, well, entirely we've curated them pretty carefully to be mindful that there were not people from the same company, because we have artistic directors, managing directors, there are a couple of production managers, that there were not people from the same company in any one homeroom, and including like a variety of theater sizes and, you know, a diversity of organizations. And we also surveyed people for their comfort level. We wanted to give participants opportunity to opt out of being with another colleague that may have caused harm in the past, or that they just didn't want to be having these conversations with. So that was the way that we crafted those homerooms. And in terms of the seed planning team, it was important for us to be really clear about the fact that we're not experts. We are also participants. We are also trying to carry these things back to our own organizations. So we came up with this term as being hosts. Like, we are the hosts of this party discussion. So we will, you know, get you a drink, metaphorically. I'm all about the metaphors. We will make sure that you're taken care of, but we're also going to be engaging in these conversations. I wish we could get you all a drink, but I haven't figured out the way to do that on Zoom.
Yeah, go ahead, Lauren.
No, I was just going to say we will. That'll be part of our next project.
So a lot of this, as you might imagine, because of the long, I mean, listen, there's a couple things that I think are very worth naming, right? Which is all of this organizing came out of a post-pandemic, kind of came into a post-pandemic environment where basically everyone existed in this virtual space. And what that has meant is that I think actually that people have been able to commit more time because they haven't had to be in person in that way. And that's really been a kind of extraordinary gift of this work. Another thing that I just want to say is, like, we get asked a lot, like, what is the purpose of this work? How does it, like, what is the action of it? So a big one really is just this notion of community building, right? And that idea of coalition building through shared vocabulary and shared experiences. And we've had sort of, Mia Mingus has come in to do a workshop with us. We have a lineup of other sort of like extraordinary leaders in their work that we're wanting to expose the larger work group to. There are two primary sort of initiatives that are tied to the work group that are in some various form of development, right? The first was mentioned earlier, which is our demographic survey project. So the very first work group meeting that we gathered together, we presented all participants with an ask, which was we asked them to go back and look at the demographic makeup of their staffs and boards for the last 5 years, and then also to share the demographic makeup post-pandemic to see what impact the pandemic had had on the demographic makeup of their staffs. And all that data was shared and collected, and we were able to kind of like collate that into a kind of really great pivot chart. Yay, pivot charts. And that data project is going to continue, and we're bringing together an ad hoc committee to determine what that is. And then the last thing is to, I think, Leslie's question about the board and board participation in this. One of the things that we've been working to do is to organize what we're calling an anti-racism trustee cohort in the Bay Area. And the idea behind that is that each participant theater in the work group is being invited to nominate 2 trustees to participate collectively in an anti-racism training. And that once that training has occurred, our hope is, and our desire is, to continue to organize opportunities for this now new cohort of trustees that represent 40 odd theaters in the Bay Area to continue to meet and have conversations around anti-racism work. And largely this is about creating allyship at the board level for the work of our leaders trying to move institutions in this direction.
Great, and just
and yeah.
Go ahead, Eric.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead, Mina.
Okay, I was just going to lift up what Lauren is talking about in the chat. Lauren, do you want to speak to that, or do you want me to speak to that? I think it's important.
I'm happy to speak to it if y'all want to jump in, if I miss anything. So a question came about funding in terms of paying some of our guests. I also want to lift up that the C team, as well as the accountability work group, is very diverse in who is participating, right? So there are folks who still have their jobs and are on salary, and then there are independent artists who are on unemployment or can't get unemployment. And that's true of our C team as well as the larger work group, also thinking about the difference in size. And it is a lot of work and it's a lot of hours. So we are committed to compensating everyone who, all the guests who come in and offer their labor to us. That has happened so far through some personal donations. It's happened through anonymous donors that have been funneled through. Mina, is it okay if I just name? Through Crowded Fire, an anonymous donor offered money to support the group. So that funneled through Crowded Fire in sort of a fiscal sponsorship type of way. Cal Shakes has apportioned sometimes part of their budget, which Eric, if you want to talk more about that. But so that is what has happened to support them so far. But there is a thought around how do we invite the accountability work group to, as part of the action, invest financially in funding the work of the group that everyone is benefiting from. And we're currently in the space of where, in a lovely way, we've been talking about it as a C team, but some of the members of the larger group, before we sort of talked about it as a whole group, have contacted us saying, how can we fund this work? And then there are also some grants that we are looking at. So it's like everything else, it's in process, but I don't know if y'all want to add anything.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is, thank you for that, is just, we just started this. you know, this is part of the thing we're all like, oh, scarcity, financial scarcity. There is an abundance of compassion and wisdom in our communities. And so a group of us got together and we're like, we're not going to wait. We're going to be, we won't be urgent, but we will be responsive to what is going on. And this is a moment where people are not in production. It's a moment we're all working through the WCU White American Theater demands and the Living Doc demands. I mean, this is the moment. And so we all just felt this was one of the most important things that we could be doing right now.
Two minutes left. I hate being the time. Sorry, I was muted. I hate being the timekeeper because I'm really trying to do personal work around urgency, and being the timekeeper does not support that. But just to say, I think this has been amazing. Thank you, the three of you, for joining me and just to be here. This is really amazing. I wonder, in these last 2 minutes, we had planned or hoped to be able to share out with you, to be able to take some time in this work group session to give you all a moment to reflect through writing, to take a writing reflection moment. But we're going to drop a couple questions in the chat, I think, is what I'm seeing in my document. And we're going to ask you all just to maybe think about this and consider this as you move forward through the rest of this day. The questions are, who are you accountable to? Who do you serve? And think about that through your region, through yourself, through your staff, through your artists. Who are you accountable to, and who do you serve? And I think you begin to understand kind of what your community is. You begin to understand what this ecology is that we're talking about here. Closing thoughts, any of you?
Can I say, because Sonia, you said something when we were in the meeting about a lot of these artistic leaders originally being like, how are we making a change? How come what we do theater doesn't have anything to do with, social justice, and we're not going to change everything? And I want to come back to something that I've been struggling with, but has been important to me. I don't get to decide what the revolution is. I can only do my work. Someone in 100 years will tell me if what we did was historic. So just do the work and don't worry about whether you're changing the world. Change your world, which is your little circle.
I love that.
Great. We're going to end on that. Thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure sharing this space with you.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you all for listening and being here. Take good care.
Hey friends, it's Devin.
Hey, Devin.
Josh is dropping some info in the chat. He did once and you can do it again, but we do have a lobby space open. It's like a Zoom hangout room that if any of you have time and want to go in there to talk to more people who are interested in this model, feel free to pop on over there. It's got some staff members in it to support, but it's just for more casual conversation, but there seems like there's a lot of interest in this model if any of you have time.
Yeah, and I think, Devin, that we'd be willing for anyone who wants to reach out to us to talk more about it. I don't know if we have the email, the Bay Area Theater Accountability Workgroup email handy, but we could put it in the chat. It goes to the whole seed team.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you all. This was wonderful.
Oh, I spelled it wrong.
You'll get a lot of folks emailing you. Thank you so much.